One time, King Erminrek called Vidga to council, and Vidga spoke to the king. "Sir, it seems to me you should be wary of your kinsman, King Dietrich of Bern. It seems to me that he is preparing some great deed against you, because he is an unfaithful man and a great fighter. I suspect that you will maintain or lose your royal power as a result of his desire to fight. You will have to prepare to defend yourself. Since he became king, he has expanded his kingdom in many places and reduced your kingdom. Who has tribute from Hunaland, which he took with his sword, and which belonged to your father? It is none other than King Thidrek, and he will not share it with you, and you will never receive it as long as he rules in Bern." The king answered, "What you remind me of is true. That land belonged to my father, and I do not know whether it should belong less to me than to King Didrik, but I shall certainly take it." And Vidga spoke now. "Let us follow this plan, that you send Reinald, the great knight, and 60 knights with him to Hunaland, and bid them send you tribute. If it is rendered, then all is well. But anyone who speaks against it is truly your enemy, whether it is King Thidrek or some other man." This plan pleased the king, and he ordered it carried out. The messengers now traveled their way to Hunaland and summoned an assembly of the men of the country. Reinald brought forth his mission. The landsmen replied, "We have already given all the tribute we owe to King Thidrek. If he gives it up to King Erminrek, that is in order, but we will not pay both of them tribute." They sent word to King Thidrek to come and answer for this, and they told him what had happened. King Thidrek rode out of Bern with 12 knights, and he rode to the assembly. And when he arrived, he stood before them and brought forth his case. He bade Reinald go home and tell King Erminrek that he would never receive tribute from Hunaland as long as King Thidrek was in Bern, and that he would have much ingratitude for this mission. Reinald returned to King Erminrek and told him how things stood. Vidga heard these tidings and spoke. "Yes, it has happened, as I have suspected for a long time. King Thidrek does not wish to be a lesser man than you, and it will turn out as he wishes if you are not careful." King Erminrek answered Vidga's speech. "So it seems to me that my kinsman King Dietrich of Bern has been belligerent both against me and against everyone else, wherever he has been. And now he wishes to measure himself against me and my kingdom. That shall be repaid, as you shall now hear. Before he has gained that, he shall hang. Then he and I shall both know who is the more powerful." Heimir spoke. God help you, King Thidrek. You shall pay for this with all kinds of dishonor when you lose so many of your kinsmen and family members. Vidga is guilty of this and everything else." "Yes," said Vidga. "This will be the most shameful deed that will ever be told as long as the world stands, King Erminrek." Vidga went immediately to his horse and rode as fast as he could, day and night. But King Erminrek had at the same moment all of his horns sounded and called out that all of his men should take up weapons and mount their horses. When his army was prepared, they rode day and night as hard as they could, and collected every man they could, and summoned them all to Bern. Vidga arrived at midnight in Bern, and all the castle gates were closed. The guardsmen became aware that a man had come up to the castle, and they asked who it was. Vidga identified himself and bade them open the gate. The guards went to the gate, and some went to tell King Thidrek that Vidga, his comrade, had arrived. As soon as King Thidrek had heard that, he got up and went to meet him. And as soon as they met, the king welcomed him warmly and happily, and asked what news he could tell him, and whether he knew why King Erminrek was demanding tribute from his land. And Vidga said, "I can tell you bad news, and it is unfortunately true. If you wait the day here, then King Erminrek will arrive here with an army of enemies. You have now been so slandered before him that he will kill you as he has his other kinsmen." The king went into his hall and had his horns blown, and summoned all of his chieftains, his counselors, and his knights, and told them the news Vidga had brought. He stated the case in this fashion: "We now have two choices. The first is to await him and to defend ourselves as well as we can. Before it is over, King Erminrek will lose many worthy knights, and we shall lose our kingdom and ourselves because of the uneven odds. The other choice is to prepare ourselves and ride away and leave the castle. God will decide whether we get it back. We will keep our lives and our men. This is my choice, if your will is the same as mine." Hildebrand, his best friend, replied, "God knows that we will now have to leave your kingdom dishonorably until we will be able to take it back. Each of you who will flee should stand up and prepare himself as quickly as possible, because there is little time to talk. Let us ride away now, at this time, and we will be able to take back what is ours, if God is willing." When Hildebrand had said this, many women and children passed the word around in Bern. Many cried out for their husbands, their sons, their brothers, their fathers, and some for good friends. In another place, there was much noise of weapons and neighing of horses, when each knight took his weapons and his horse, and there was much weeping and wailing in this night in Bern, and much noise of horns and shouting. Now all were ready to ride with their weapons, and they all went into the largest hall of the king, and sat there, and talked and drank wine. Heimir, their comrade, came riding to Bern, and he told them the same story, namely that King Erminrek was not far away, and that he had 5,000 knights and countless other men. But King Thidrek had only 800 knights. And when they had heard this, Heimir swore by God and said, "And certainly we shall leave our kingdom with dishonor, because of King Erminrek. But he shall still receive more harm than gain from us in return before we part, even if he takes Bern and all Amlungland." Master Hildebrand took now the standard of King Thidrek and bade all follow him. Now all the knights ran to their horses. Hildebrand rode out into Langobardland and turned along the Mundia, and so into King Erminrek's kingdom. They burned their towns and castles, villages and farms, and killed many men. Before they rode to the north through the mountains, they had burned 11,000 villages, farms, and castles in King Erminrek's land. And thus, King Dietrich of Bern, or mostly known today as Dietrich of Bern, was threatened by Sivkar's will for revenge. So next time, hear about Heimir becoming Erminrek's enemy, Thidrek's ride over the northern mountains, and his escape to a king named Attila. Thanks for tuning in, and see you again next time, back here at Sagenheim.